Hashtag The Alchemist's Choice, a gay fantasy romance. Rain's fingers trembled as he pushed through the heavy oak doors of the Alchemist's Guild, his shirt clinging to his skin from the magical downpour outside. The weekly gathering had already begun without him, voices echoing from the main hall as he tried to slip in unnoticed. His head pounded with exhaustion from the night shift, treating victims of magical poisoning that had kept him awake until dawn. The remnants of disturbing dreams still clouded his mind, fragments of memories featuring his former lover, the noble alpha who had used his gift and then abandoned him, leaving behind only betrayal and shame. The guild hall buzzed with nervous energy as Rain took his usual seat near the back, hoping to blend into the shadows. Master Thorn stood at the podium, his weathered face grave as he addressed the assembled alchemists and herbalists. "Today we welcome a new member to our ranks," he announced, his voice carrying across the stone chamber. "A blood mage who will be overseeing artifact security and magical research." Rain's heart sank. Blood magic was the domain of demons and dark creatures, beings who drew power from life essence itself. The guild had never housed such a practitioner before, and the tension in the room was palpable. Whispers rippled through the crowd as footsteps echoed from the side entrance. Then he appeared. Kaylee's moved with predatory grace, his tall frame commanding attention without effort. His hair was black as midnight, pulled back to reveal sharp cheekbones and a jawline that could cut glass. But it was his eyes that made Rain's breath catch, ash-gray orbs that seemed to hold the weight of centuries, scanning the room with calculated precision. When his gaze swept over the assembled crowd, Rain felt a jolt of recognition so strong it nearly knocked him from his chair. The demon's aura flared suddenly, a wave of dark energy that made several guild members step back in alarm. Those gray eyes locked onto Rain's face, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. Kaylee's nostrils flared slightly, as if catching a familiar scent, and his lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Some of you," Kaylee said, his voice cutting through the silence like an enchanted blade, "are already familiar. The scent is recognizable." Rain's stomach dropped. 3 days ago, he had stood before the mirror of selection, a ritual that allowed Omegas to reject potential bonding partners. Kaylee's had approached him then, offering formal courtship with all the ancient protocols. Rain had looked into those ash-gray eyes and felt such terror at the intensity. He saw there that he had spoken the words of rejection without hesitation. He had thought it was over, that the demon would move on to easier prey. He had been wrong. As the meeting continued, Rain found himself unable to focus on Master Thorn's words. His eyes kept drifting to Kaylee's, who had taken a position near the front of the room, his presence impossible to ignore. The demon's power radiated outward in subtle waves, making the air itself feel thick and charged. Other guild members shifted uncomfortably, their omega and beta instincts recognizing a predator in their midst. When the formal introductions ended, Rain tried to slip away before anyone could corner him with questions about the new blood mage. But as he reached the door, a familiar voice called his name. "Ren." Kaylee's voice was silk over steel. "A word, if you please." There was no escaping now. Rain turned slowly, keeping his expression carefully neutral as the demon approached. Up close, Kaylee's was even more intimidating, tall enough that Rain had to tilt his head back to meet his gaze, with broad shoulders that strained against his dark robes. Scars crossed his hands and what little visible skin showed above his collar, speaking of a violent past. "I don't believe we were properly introduced," Kaylee said, extending a scarred hand. "I am Kaylee's Shadowmere, blood mage of the 13th Circle." Rain stared at the offered hand for a long moment before reluctantly taking it. The contact sent electricity racing up his arm, and he saw Kaylee's eyes flicker with something that might have been surprise. The demon's grip was firm but not crushing, his skin surprisingly warm for a creature of shadow and blood. "Rain Aldrich," he replied, pulling his hand back as quickly as politeness allowed. "Guild herbalist and poison specialist." Indeed, Kaylee's gaze traveled over Rain's face with uncomfortable intensity. "Your reputation precedes you. They say you can identify any magical toxin by scent alone. and that your healing drafts are unmatched in the eastern provinces. The compliment felt like a trap. Rain had learned to be suspicious of flattery, especially from powerful alphas who saw his gifts as tools to be exploited. "I do my job," he said curtly. Kaylee's tilted his head, studying Rain like a fascinating specimen. "And what job might that be exactly?" "Beyond the obvious, of course." The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications Rain didn't want to examine. He was saved from answering by the approach of Sen Night Whisper, a werewolf who served as the guild's security chief. Sen's amber eyes were fixed on Kaylee's with barely concealed hostility. "Rain," Sen said, his voice carefully controlled. "Is everything all right here?" "Perfectly fine," Kaylee's replied before Rain could speak. "We were just discussing professional matters. Nothing that concerns the security department."
Senes javtaitaned.
"Everything concerns security when it involves new members, especially those with your particular qualifications." The tension between the two alphas was thick enough to cut with a knife. Rain found himself caught in the middle, acutely aware of how their posturing was drawing attention from other guild members. He needed to escape before this turned into a territorial dispute. "I have work to attend to," Rain said, stepping back from both men. "If you'll excuse me." He didn't wait for permission, turning on his heel and striding toward the herbalist wing of the guild. Behind him, he could hear the low murmur of voices but couldn't make out the words. His hands shook slightly as he fumbled with the keys to his workshop, the encounter with Kaylee's having shaken him more than he cared to admit. The workshop was his sanctuary, lined with shelves of carefully labeled herbs and bottles of distilled essences. The familiar scents of sage, rosemary, and dried moonflowers helped calm his racing pulse. He had built this space over years of careful work, establishing himself as an indispensable member of the guild despite his Omega status. It was proof that he could succeed on his own merits, without depending on an alpha's protection or approval. Rain threw himself into his work, grinding herbs and measuring tinctures with mechanical precision. The repetitive motions helped quiet his mind, pushing away memories of ash-gray eyes and the electric touch of scarred fingers. He was just beginning to feel centered again when a knock at his door shattered his concentration. "Come in," he called, expecting San or one of the other herbalists. Instead, Kaylee stepped through the doorway, his tall frame filling the space. The demon's presence seemed to make the workshop shrink around them, intimate and charged with possibility. Rain's grip tightened on his mortar and pestle, using it as an anchor against the sudden weakness in his knees. "I hope I'm not disturbing your work," Kaylee said, though his tone suggested he didn't particularly care if he was. "What do you want?" Rain asked, not looking up from his grinding. "To apologize, actually." The words were so unexpected that Rain's head snapped up in surprise. Kaylee stood near the door, his hands clasped behind his back in a gesture that was almost formal. "My behavior at the meeting was presumptuous. I should not have singled you out so publicly." Rain studied the demon's face, searching for signs of deception. But Kaylee's expression seemed genuinely contrite, his gray eyes softer than they had been earlier. "You're apologizing for making me uncomfortable?" "I'm apologizing for acting without consideration for your position within the guild," Kaylee's corrected. "Your rejection at the mirror of selection was clear and final. I should have respected that boundary." The words should have been reassuring, but something in Kaylee's tone made Rain's stomach flutter with nervous energy. There was an intensity beneath the polite words, a hunger that the demon wasn't quite managing to hide. Rain set down his mortar and pestle, wiping his hands on his apron as he tried to gather his thoughts. "Then why are you here?" he asked finally. "In the guild, I mean. There are other organizations that would welcome a blood mage of your caliber." Kaylee's was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting over the shelves of herbs and potions. "Perhaps I was drawn by the reputation of a certain herbalist," he said softly. "Or perhaps I simply wanted to understand why someone would choose to reject what I had to offer." The admission hung between them like a challenge. Rain felt heat rise in his cheeks, remembering the moment at the mirror when he had looked into Kaylee's eyes and seen such raw desire that it had terrified him. The demon had offered everything: protection, partnership, a bond that would have elevated Rain's status beyond anything he could achieve on his own. And Rain had turned it down because he had learned the cost of depending on an alpha's affection. "I don't need protection," Rain said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I've built my own life here. I can see that." Kaylee stepped closer, and Rain caught a whiff of his scent, smoke and cedar with an underlying sweetness that made his Omega instincts sing. But what if I wasn't offering protection? What if I was offering something else entirely? Before Rain could ask what he meant, another knock interrupted them. This time it was Sen, his expression dark as he took in the scene. The werewolf's nostrils flared as he scented the air, and Rain knew he could smell the pheromones that both he and Kaylee's were unconsciously releasing. "Rain," Sen said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Master Thorn needs to see you. Immediately." It was clearly an excuse to separate them, but Rain was grateful for the interruption. He needed space to think, to process what Kaylee's had said and what it might mean. "Of course," he said, untying his apron. "I'll be right there." Kaylee stepped aside to let him pass, but as Rain moved toward the door, the demon's hand brushed against his arm. The touch was brief, almost accidental, but it sent fire racing through Rain's veins. He looked up to find Kaylee's watching him with an expression of such intense longing that it made his breath catch. "This isn't over," Kaylee said quietly, so only Rain could hear. "You may have rejected my formal offer, but I won't give up so easily." Rain fled the workshop without responding, his heart pounding as he made his way through the guild's corridors. Behind him, he could hear Sen's raised voice as the werewolf confronted Kaylee's, but the words were lost in the rush of blood in his ears. He needed air, space, time to think clearly without the demon's overwhelming presence clouding his judgment. The next few days passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Rain threw himself into his work with renewed dedication, staying late to catalog new ingredients and develop more efficient brewing techniques. He told himself it was professional pride, but the truth was that he was hiding. Every time he heard Kaylee's voice echoing from another part of the guild, every time he caught a whiff of that distinctive scent, his carefully constructed defenses threatened to crumble. It was on the third day that Kaylee's made his next move. Rain was in the archive room, researching the properties of a rare fungus that had been delivered that morning, when the door clicked shut behind him. He turned to find Kaylee's standing there, holding a scroll case that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. "I have a commission for you," the demon said without preamble. "Artifact safety analysis. The guild leadership felt your expertise would be invaluable." Rain's jaw clenched. "That's not part of my usual duties." "No," Kaylee's agreed, approaching slowly. "But it is within my authority to assign special projects to guild members. And this particular artifact requires someone with your unique gifts." He extended the scroll case and Rain reluctantly took it. The moment his fingers touched the ancient wood, power surged through him, old magic, blood magic, tinged with something darker. The scroll itself was made of vellum so old it was nearly transparent, covered in symbols that seemed to shift and writhe when he looked at them directly. "What is this?" Rain asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "A contract," Kaylee's replied, moving to stand beside him. "Written in the blood of a demon prince 3 centuries ago. It details the binding of an Omega to an Alpha bloodline, but the terms are unusual." Rain's hands shook as he unrolled the scroll, the archaic script swimming before his eyes. The language was ancient, predating modern common tongue by centuries, but as he focused his gift on the parchment, the meaning began to emerge. It was indeed a bonding contract, but not the simple claiming document he had expected. "This isn't about ownership," he said slowly, his finger tracing the elaborate borders. "It's about choice. The Omega retains the right to break the bond at any time, and the Alpha is forbidden from using force or coercion." "Very good." Kaylee's voice was warm with approval. "Most would see only the binding aspects. You understand the deeper meaning." Rain looked up at him, searching for answers in those ash-gray eyes. Why are you showing me this? Because I want you to understand what I was truly offering at the mirror of selection. Kaylee's hand moved to cover Rain's on the scroll, his touch gentle but electric. Not ownership, not protection. Choice, the freedom to be yourself, enhanced rather than diminished by our bond. The words hit Rain like a physical blow. All his life, he had been taught that Omega bonds were about submission, about giving up autonomy in exchange for security. His former lover had reinforced those lessons, using Rain's gifts for his own advancement before discarding him when scandal threatened his reputation. But this document suggested something entirely different, a partnership between equals, bound by love rather than duty. I don't understand, Rain said, his voice thick with emotion. You're a demon prince. You could have anyone. Why would you want a bond that gives you no power over your mate? Kaylee's free hand came up to cup Rain's face, thumb brushing over his cheekbone with infinite tenderness. Because power without choice is meaningless. I've lived for centuries, Rain. I've seen bonds forged in dominance and fear, and I've watched them crumble into resentment and hate. What I want with you, it's something I've never experienced before. Rain's breath caught as Kaylee's leaned closer, close enough that he could feel the demon's warmth against his skin. What do you want? He whispered. I want you to choose me, Kaylee said simply. Not because you have to, not because I'm powerful enough to protect you, but because you want to. Because when you look at me, you see something worth choosing. The intensity in his voice made Rain's knees weak. He could feel Kaylee's desire like a living thing between them, but beneath it was something softer, more vulnerable. This ancient, powerful demon was asking for his affection, not demanding it. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. Rain started, then stopped as the archive door burst open. San stood in the doorway, his amber eyes blazing with fury as he took in the scene. What the hell is going on here? Kaylee stepped back immediately, his expression shifting to neutral politeness. Mr. Knight whisper. Rain was analyzing an artifact for me. Nothing more. Bullshit. Sen's voice was rough with barely contained rage. I can smell what's happening here. You're trying to coerce him. I'm trying to court him, Kaylee's corrected calmly. There's a difference. Not to an Omega who's already been burned by an Alpha's promises. San moved protectively in front of Rain, his body language screaming challenge. He said no at the mirror. That should have been the end of it. Rain watched the confrontation with growing alarm. Sen's protective instincts were triggered, and Kaylee's power was beginning to rise in response to the perceived threat. The air between them crackled with tension, and Rain could feel the magical energy building to dangerous levels. Stop, he said, stepping between them. Both of you, this is my choice to make. Sen's expression softened as he looked at Rain. He's using your gifts against you. Can't you see that? First the artifact analysis, now this ancient contract. He's manipulating you. And what if he is? Rain asked, surprising himself with the question. What if I don't care about his motives as long as he's honest about what he wants? The words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. Sen's face went pale, and even Kaylee's seemed taken aback by Rain's fierce declaration. But it was true. Rain was tired of being protected, tired of having his choices made for him by well-meaning friends who thought they knew what was best. Rain, Sen said softly, you don't have to prove anything. Not to him, not to anyone. Don't I? Rain turned to face Kaylee's, his chin raised in defiance. You want me to choose you? Then prove you're worth choosing. Show me that you're not just another alpha who sees my gifts as tools to be used. Kaylee's eyes flashed with something that might have been respect. What would you have me do? Be honest, Rain said simply. Tell me why you're really here. Tell me what you want from me that you can't get from anyone else. For a long moment, Kaylee's was silent. Then, slowly, he began to speak. I came to this guild because I heard stories about a herbalist who could heal anything, who could create potions that defied natural law. I expected to find someone useful, someone whose skills I could employ for my own purposes. He paused, his gaze locked on Rain's face. I didn't expect to find someone who would make me question everything I thought I knew about desire and connection. Rain felt his heart skip a beat. What do you mean? I mean, Kaylee said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, that when I first saw you at the Mirror of Selection, I felt something I haven't experienced in over 300 years. Not just lust, though that was certainly present, but something deeper, a recognition, as if I had been searching for you my entire existence without knowing it. The confession hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they were ready to cross. Rain could feel Sen's disapproval radiating from behind him, but all his attention was focused on Kaylee's face, searching for any sign of deception. That's not possible, Rain said finally. You don't even know me. Don't I? Kaylee stepped closer, his hand reaching out to touch Rain's face again. I know that you've been hurt by someone who should have cherished you. I know that you've built walls around your heart so high that you can barely see over them. I know that you work yourself to exhaustion rather than risk depending on someone else's affection. Each word hit Rain like a physical blow. How could this demon, this stranger, see so clearly into his soul? You're guessing, he said weakly.
I'm recognizing, Kaylee's corrected.
Because I've done the same thing. I've spent centuries convinced that power was the only thing that mattered, that emotional connections were weaknesses to be exploited. But when I look at you, I see the possibility of something different, something real. Rain's defenses crumbled a little more with each word. He wanted to believe Kaylee's, wanted to trust that this connection between them was genuine. But the memory of his previous lover's betrayal held him back, whispering warnings about the dangers of trusting an alpha's promises. I need time, he said finally, to think about what you've said. Kaylee's nodded, stepping back to give him space. Of course. But Rain. He waited until Rain met his eyes. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not giving up. As the demon left the archive room, Rain sank into a chair, his hands shaking as he set down the ancient scroll. San approached cautiously, his earlier anger replaced by concern. Are you all right? The werewolf asked softly. Rain looked up at his friend, seeing the worry in those amber eyes. San had been there through his recovery from the previous relationship, had helped him rebuild his confidence and sense of self-worth. The werewolf deserved honesty, even if it wasn't what he wanted to hear. I don't know, Rain admitted. He's not what I expected. That's what makes him dangerous, San said, pulling up a chair beside him. Rain, I've seen what happens when powerful alphas decide they want something. They don't stop until they get it, and they don't care what they destroy in the process. But what if he's different? Rain asked. What if he means what he says about choice and partnership? Sen's expression softened. Then you'll be the first Omega in history to find an alpha who truly sees you as an equal. But Rain, the odds of that. He shook his head. I just don't want to see you get hurt again. Rain understood his friend's concern, but he was beginning to realize that avoiding all risk meant avoiding all possibility of happiness. His previous relationship had been built on deception and exploitation, but that didn't mean every alpha would treat him the same way. Maybe it was time to stop letting his past define his future. I need to know, he said finally. I need to find out if what he's offering is real. Sun sighed but nodded. Then I'll be here. Whatever happens, you won't face it alone. The promise warmed Rain's heart, reminding him that he wasn't as isolated as he sometimes felt. He had friends who cared about him, a career he loved, and a life he had built on his own terms. Whether or not he chose to explore what Kaylee's was offering, he would survive. That night, Rain dreamed of ash-gray eyes and gentle hands, of ancient contracts written in blood and possibility. When he woke, his decision was made. The next morning, he sought out Kaylee's in the demon's temporary quarters in the guild's east wing. The room was spartanly furnished but immaculately clean, with books and scrolls arranged in precise order on every surface. Kaylee's himself was seated at a desk, writing in a leather-bound journal, his dark hair falling across his forehead as he concentrated. Rain, he said, looking up with surprise. I wasn't expecting you. I've been thinking about what you said, Rain replied, trying to keep his voice steady. About choice and partnership and recognition. Kaylee's set down his pen and turned to face him fully. And I want to know more. Rain took a deep breath, gathering his courage. I want to understand what you're offering, what you're asking for. But I need honesty from you. Complete honesty. You'll have it, Kaylee said immediately. What do you want to know? Everything. Rain pulled up a chair, settling himself across from the demon. Start with why you left your realm. What brought you to the mortal world? Kaylee's was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the desk surface. I was exiled, he said finally, cast out by my own clan for refusing to participate in their political games. What kind of games? The kind that involve using omega bonds as weapons. Kaylee's voice was bitter. My clan wanted me to seduce and bind a particular omega whose family controlled important trade routes. When I refused, they convinced me that leaving was in my best interest. Rain felt a chill run down his spine. They threatened you? They threatened everyone I cared about. Kaylee's hands clenched into fists. My mother, my younger brother, the servants who had raised me. I could have fought them, but the cost would have been too high. The pain in his voice was raw and genuine, and Rain found himself leaning forward in sympathy. How long ago was this? 50 years. Kaylee's met his eyes. I've been wandering the mortal realms ever since, trying to find a place where I could use my abilities without being consumed by them. And you think you've found that here? I think I've found something better. Kaylee's reached across the desk to take Rain's hand, his touch warm and steady. I think I've found someone who makes me want to be better than I am. The words sent warmth spreading through Rain's chest. He had expected manipulation, calculated seduction designed to wear down his defenses. Instead, he found vulnerability and genuine emotion. It was more dangerous than any smooth lie could have been. You're scared, he said, reading the tension in Kaylee's shoulders. You're as terrified of this connection as I am. Terrified, Kaylee's agreed, because I've never wanted anything as much as I want you, and I've never had so much to lose. The admission hung between them like a confession. Rain could feel the truth of it in the way Kaylee's fingers tightened around his, in the slight tremor in his voice. This powerful demon, this creature of shadow and blood, was laying himself bare in a way that took immense courage. I'm not ready, Rain said softly, to make any permanent decisions, but I'd like to try, to see if what we're feeling is real. Kaylee's smile was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. What did you have in mind? Courtship, Rain said, the word feeling strange on his tongue. Old-fashioned, formal courtship. No bonds, no claims, just getting to know each other. I would be honored, Kaylee said, bringing Rain's hand to his lips to press a gentle kiss to his knuckles. But I should warn you, I've never courted anyone before. I may need guidance. Rain laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in months. I think we can figure it out together. Over the following weeks, their courtship became the talk of the guild. It was unlike anything anyone had seen before. A demon and an omega navigating the delicate dance of attraction with careful respect for each other's boundaries. Kaylee's brought Rain flowers from the magical gardens, rare blooms that glowed with inner light. Rain prepared special teas for Kaylee's, blends designed to help him adjust to the mortal realm's different magical climate. They spent their evenings walking through the guild's corridors, talking about everything and nothing. Rain learned that Kaylee's was an accomplished scholar, with expertise in 17 different magical disciplines. Kaylee's discovered that Rain wrote poetry in his spare time, verses about healing and growth that spoke to something deep in the demon's soul. Read me something, Kaylee's said one evening as they sat in the guild's garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Rain hesitated, then pulled out a small leather journal from his robes. This one's about transformation, he said, opening to a page marked with a pressed flower. I wrote it after my last relationship ended. He cleared his throat and began to read. From bitter root to healing balm, from shattered glass to window clear, the heart that learns to trust again finds strength within its deepest fear. No magic potion, no ancient spell can mend what time and care can heal, but those who dare to love again find that their scars can make them real. When he finished, Kaylee's was staring at him with an expression of such tender amazement that Rain felt his cheeks burn. You wrote that about healing from heartbreak? I wrote that about learning to believe in possibility again, Rain corrected. About finding the courage to be vulnerable. It's beautiful, Kaylee said softly. You're beautiful. The words should have been a simple compliment, but the way Kaylee said them made Rain's heart race. There was reverence in his voice, as if he were speaking of something sacred. Rain had never been looked at that way before, as if he were precious beyond measure. Kaylee's, he whispered, and the demon's name felt like a prayer on his lips. I know, Kaylee said, understanding without explanation. I feel it too. They leaned closer, drawn by an invisible force neither could resist. Rain's eyes fluttered closed as Kaylee's breath ghosted over his lips, the moment stretching between them like spun glass. Then footsteps echoed from the path behind them, and they sprang apart like guilty children. Master Thorn appeared around the corner, his expression carefully neutral as he took in the scene. Rain, Kaylee's, he said with formal politeness. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Not at all, Master Thorn, Kaylee's replied smoothly, though Rain could see the frustrated desire in his eyes. We were just discussing Rain's research into herbal adaptation techniques. Of course, the old man's tone suggested he didn't believe a word of it. Rain, I need to speak with you about the Henderson case, the magical poisoning victim from last week. Rain stood reluctantly, his body still humming with awareness of Kaylee's proximity. Is there a problem? Several problems, actually. Would you mind accompanying me to my office? It wasn't really a request, and Rain knew it. He glanced at Kaylee's, seeing understanding and patience in those gray eyes. Tomorrow evening? He asked quietly. I'll be here, Kaylee's promised. As Rain followed Master Thorn through the guild's winding corridors, he tried to focus on the conversation about magical toxins and treatment protocols. But his mind kept drifting back to that moment in the garden, to the way Kaylee's had looked at him as if he were the answer to every question the demon had ever asked. It was only when they reached Master Thorn's office that Rain realized something was wrong. The older man's expression was grave, and there was a tension in his shoulders that spoke of serious trouble. Sit down, Rain, Master Thorn said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. We need to discuss your relationship with our new blood mage. Rain's stomach dropped. Is there a problem? Several problems, Master Thorn repeated, pulling out a thick folder from his desk drawer. I've been receiving complaints from some of our more traditional members. They're concerned about the nature of your courtship. What about it? Rain asked, though he had a sinking suspicion he knew where this was going. They feel that Kaylee's is overstepping his bounds by pursuing you so publicly. As a blood mage, he should be focusing on his duties to the guild, not on personal relationships with other members. Rain felt anger rise in his chest. My personal relationships are none of their business. Normally, I would agree, Master Thorn said carefully, but there are other considerations. Your previous relationship with Lord Blackwood caused significant scandal for the guild. We cannot afford another situation where your romantic entanglements reflect poorly on our organization. The words hit Rain like a physical blow. His relationship with Lord Blackwood had ended in disaster when the noble alpha had been exposed for using Rain's gifts to create illegal potions. The scandal had nearly destroyed Rain's career and had reflected poorly on the guild's reputation for integrity. Kaylee's is nothing like Blackwood, Rain said, his voice tight with controlled fury. He's never asked me to compromise my ethics or use my abilities for personal gain. Perhaps not, Master Thorn agreed. But he is still a demon, Rain. His very nature makes him dangerous, especially to an omega of your sensitivity. The guild leadership is concerned about your safety. My safety? Rain stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the stone floor. Or their reputation? Master Thorn's expression softened slightly. Rain, I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying this because I care about your well-being. You've worked so hard to rebuild your career after the Blackwood incident. Don't throw it all away for a demon who may not be able to control his nature. The words were meant to be kind, but they felt like another cage closing around Rain's heart. He had thought he was free to make his own choices, to pursue his own happiness. But apparently, the guild's opinion of his personal life was still more important than his own desires. "What are you asking me to do?" he said finally. "I'm asking you to be careful," Master Thorn replied. "And I'm asking you to consider whether this relationship is worth the potential consequences to your career and standing within the guild." Rain stared at the older man, seeing the genuine concern in his eyes. Master Thorn had been like a father to him, had helped him through the darkest period of his life. But now, that same paternal protectiveness felt suffocating. "I need time to think," Rain said. "Of course, take all the time you need. But Rain," Master Thorn's voice was gentle. "Whatever you decide, the guild will support you. We just want to make sure you're making the right choice." As Rain left the office, he felt the weight of expectation pressing down on him like a physical force. The guild wanted him to be safe, to be respectable, to avoid any hint of scandal. San wanted him to be protected from potential heartbreak. Everyone had an opinion about what was best for him, but no one seemed to care what he actually wanted. He was so lost in thought that he didn't notice the figure waiting in the shadows until a familiar voice called his name. "Ren." He looked up to find Kaylee's standing in an alcove near the herbalist wing, his expression serious. The demon stepped forward, and Rain could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were clenched at his sides. "I heard," Kaylee said simply, "about your meeting with Master Thorn." "News travels fast in the guild," Rain said bitterly. "It does when it involves the blood mage courting the guild's most talented herbalist." Kaylee's moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Rain, I need you to know something. If pursuing this relationship will damage your career, I'll walk away. Right now, tonight. No questions, no arguments." The offer should have been reassuring, but instead it felt like another betrayal. "Just like that? You'd give up on us without a fight." "I'd give up on us to protect you," Kaylee's corrected. "There's a difference." "No, there isn't." Rain's voice was sharp with frustration. "You'd be making the same choice everyone else wants to make for me. You'd be deciding what's best for me without asking what I want." Kaylee's eyes widened in understanding. "What do you want, Rain?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Rain looked at this demon who had turned his world upside down, who had made him feel things he had thought lost forever. He thought about the poetry they had shared, the gentle touches, the way Kaylee's looked at him as if he were something precious. "I want to choose," Rain said finally. "I want to make my own decisions about my life and my relationships. I want to stop letting other people's fears dictate my happiness. Even if it means risking everything you've built here? Especially then." Rain stepped closer, reaching out to take Kaylee's hands. "Because what good is a life built on other people's expectations? What good is safety if it means giving up the possibility of love?" Kaylee's grip tightened around his fingers. "Are you sure? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back. The guild will never see you the same way again." "Good," Rain said fiercely. "Maybe it's time for them to see me as I really am instead of as what they want me to be." The words seemed to break something loose in Kaylee's chest. He pulled Rain closer, one hand coming up to cup his face with infinite tenderness. "You're extraordinary," he whispered. "Do you know that? You're the bravest person I've ever met." "I'm terrified," Rain admitted. "So am I," Kaylee said. "But maybe that's what makes it real." This time, when they leaned toward each other, there was no interruption. Kaylee's lips were soft against Rain's, the kiss gentle and questioning. Rain melted into the embrace, his hands fisting in Kaylee's robes as he kissed back with all the pent-up longing he had been holding inside. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Kaylee's rested his forehead against Rain's, his eyes closed as if savoring the moment. "What happens now?" Rain asked softly. "Now," Kaylee said, his voice rough with emotion. We figure out how to build something that's ours. Not what they expect, not what they approve of, but what we choose together. Rain nodded, feeling a sense of rightness settle in his chest. For the first time in his life, he was choosing his own path without apology or explanation. It was terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely necessary. Together, he agreed. The next few days brought exactly the reaction Rain had expected. Word of his relationship with Kaylee's spread through the guild like wildfire, sparking heated debates about propriety, safety, and the wisdom of allowing demons into their ranks. Some members expressed support, admiring Rain's courage in following his heart. Others were less kind, whispering about his poor judgment and the dangers of consorting with creatures of shadow. Rain found himself the center of attention wherever he went, subjected to curious stares and pointed comments. It was uncomfortable but not unbearable. He had endured worse during the Blackwood scandal, and this time he had something worth fighting for. It was San who finally confronted him directly. "You're making a mistake," the werewolf said, cornering Rain in the archive room where they had first argued about Kaylee's weeks before. "A serious mistake that could destroy everything you've worked for." "My relationship with Kaylee's is not a mistake," Rain replied calmly. "It's a choice. It's a dangerous choice," San insisted. "Rain, I've been watching him. He's not what he seems." "What do you mean?" Sun pulled out a folder from his jacket, spreading several documents across the table. "I've been investigating his background. Do you know what he was doing before he came here?" Rain looked at the papers, seeing official reports and witness statements. "He told me he was exiled from his clan for refusing to participate in their political games." "That's not the whole story." San pointed to one of the documents. "He was involved in a series of incidents across 3 different realms. Magical disturbances, unexplained disappearances, entire communities that went missing overnight." Rain's stomach clenched, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Are you saying he's responsible for these things?" "I'm saying he was present for all of them," Sen replied. "And I'm saying that's a hell of a coincidence." "Coincidence isn't proof of guilt," Rain said, though doubt was beginning to creep into his voice. "No, but it's reason for caution." Sen's expression softened. "Rain, I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to protect you. If even half of what I suspect is true, Kaylee's is dangerous in ways you can't imagine." Rain stared at the documents, his mind racing. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was troubling. Could he have been wrong about Kaylee's? Could the demon he was falling in love with be hiding something dark and terrible? "I need to talk to him," Rain said finally.
Rain, no.
"If he is what I think he is, confronting him could..." "Could what?" Rain interrupted. "Could make him show his true nature? Good. I'd rather know now than find out later." San grabbed his arm as he moved toward the door. "At least let me come with you. For backup." Rain shook his head. "This is something I need to do alone." He found Kaylee's in the guild's practice rooms, working through a complex spell pattern with focused concentration. The demon's movements were fluid and precise, his magic flowing around him like liquid shadow. Watching him work, Rain found it hard to believe that someone so controlled could be responsible for the chaos described in Sen's reports. "Rain," Kaylee said, looking up as he entered. "You're earlier than usual." "We need to talk," Rain said, his voice more serious than he intended. Kaylee's immediately stopped his practice, his expression shifting to concern. "What's wrong?" Rain pulled out the folder San had given him, spreading the documents across a nearby table. "I need you to explain these." Kaylee's approached slowly, his eyes scanning the papers. As he read, his expression grew increasingly grim. When he finished, he looked up at Rain with an expression of such pain that it made Rain's heart ache. "Where did you get these?" Kaylee's asked quietly. "Sen's been investigating your background," Rain replied. "He's concerned about my safety." "And you believe him?" The question hung between them like a blade. Rain studied Kaylee's face, searching for any sign of deception or guilt. What he saw instead was exhaustion and a deep, abiding sadness. "I believe in giving you a chance to explain," Rain said finally. Kaylee's was quiet for a long moment, his hands clenched at his sides. The incidents described in those reports, he said finally, they're all real. I was present for every one of them. Rain felt his heart sink. Were you responsible? In a way. Kaylee's voice was barely above a whisper. I was hunting something, Rain, a creature that feeds on magical communities, that corrupts and destroys everything it touches. I've been tracking it for 50 years, always one step behind, always arriving just too late to prevent the devastation. What kind of creature? A void spirit, Kaylee said, his voice heavy with old grief. A being of pure entropy that seeks to unmake the ordered world. It killed my mother, destroyed my home realm, and has been spreading its corruption ever since. Rain felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. You're hunting it? I was hunting it, Kaylee's corrected. Until I came here. Until I met you. He looked up at Rain with an expression of such vulnerability that it took Rain's breath away. You asked me once why I was really here. The truth is, I came because I thought the spirit might be targeting the guild. But when I arrived, when I saw you, I forgot about everything else. You forgot about hunting a creature that's been destroying communities for 50 years? I forgot about everything except the possibility of having something to live for instead of something to die for. Kaylee's moved closer, his hands reaching out to frame Rain's face. You became more important to me than revenge, more important than duty, more important than anything I've ever known. The words should have been flattering, but Rain felt a chill run down his spine. Kaylee's, if this creature is still out there, if it's still killing people, then I'll deal with it, Kaylee said firmly. But not at the cost of losing you. I can't go back to that empty existence, Rain. I won't. Rain pulled back from Kaylee's touch, his mind racing. You're talking about abandoning a sacred duty for a relationship that's barely begun. I'm talking about choosing love over vengeance, Kaylee's corrected. About finding something worth protecting instead of something worth destroying. And what about all the people who will die while you're protecting me? The question hit Kaylee's like a physical blow. Rain saw the moment when the demon realized what he was saying, saw the horror and shame that flooded his features. Kaylee started, then stopped. I don't know. You don't know? Rain's voice rose with incredulity. Kaylee's, you just told me you've been tracking a killer for 50 years, and now you're willing to let it go free because of your feelings for me? Because I love you, Kaylee said desperately. Because for the first time in my existence, I have something worth living for. And I love you too, Rain replied, his voice thick with emotion. But I can't love someone who would let innocent people die for my sake. That's not love, Kaylee's. That's obsession. The words hung between them like a death sentence. Kaylee staggered back as if Rain had struck him, his face going pale with shock and realization. You're right, he whispered. Oh gods, you're right. What have I become? Rain's heart broke at the anguish in Kaylee's voice. He wanted to comfort the demon, to take back the harsh words, but he knew they were necessary. You've become someone who's been alone for so long that you've forgotten how to love in a healthy way. I don't know how to be healthy, Kaylee said, his voice broken. I've been consumed by revenge and duty for so long that I don't remember what it's like to be anything else. Then learn, Rain said softly. Learn how to love me without losing yourself. Learn how to be with me without abandoning your responsibilities. Kaylee's looked at him with desperate hope. You would wait for me? While I finish what I started. I would wait for you, Rain confirmed. And I would help you if you'd let me. Two people working together are stronger than one person working alone. It's dangerous, Kaylee's warned. The void spirit is cunning and powerful. Corrupts everything it touches. Then it's good that I'm an expert in dealing with magical corruption, Rain said with a small smile. And it's good that you're not facing it alone anymore. The relief on Kaylee's face was so profound that Rain felt tears prick at his eyes. The demon crossed the room in 3 quick strides, pulling Rain into a fierce embrace that lifted him off his feet. I love you, Kaylee's whispered against his hair. I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you too, Rain replied, holding on tightly. But we have work to do. Over the following weeks, Rain and Kaylee's threw themselves into research with single-minded determination. They pored over ancient texts, consulted with experts in various magical disciplines, and slowly began to piece together a picture of their enemy. The void spirit was indeed a creature of pure entropy, but it wasn't mindless. It was intelligent, calculating, and utterly dedicated to the destruction of ordered reality. It's been targeting magical communities specifically, Rain observed, studying a map covered in red marks, places where the barriers between realms are thin. It feeds on magical energy, Kaylee's explained. But more than that, it feeds on the connections between people. The bonds of love, friendship, family. These are what give communities their strength, and they're what the spirit seeks to destroy. How does it do that? Corruption, Kaylee said grimly. It whispers poison into people's minds, turns them against each other. It makes them believe that their loved ones are threats, that their communities are prisons. Once the bonds are broken, the spirit can consume the magical energy without resistance. Rain felt a chill run down his spine. Could it be targeting the guild? It's possible, Kaylee's admitted. The concentration of magical talent here would make it an attractive target. Then we need to warn Master Thorn, prepare the guild's defenses. No, Kaylee's voice was firm. If we alert the guild, we risk causing the very panic and division that the spirit feeds on. We need to handle this quietly, carefully. Rain wanted to argue, but he could see the wisdom in Kaylee's approach. The guild was already tense about their relationship. Adding fears about a supernatural threat would only make things worse. What do you suggest? He asked. We set a trap, Kaylee said. We make ourselves bait. The plan was dangerous and complex, requiring precise timing and absolute trust between them. They would use their bond as a lure, broadcasting their emotional connection to draw the spirit's attention. When it came to corrupt their relationship, they would be ready with a binding spell that would trap it long enough for Kaylee's to destroy it. The risk is enormous, Kaylee's warned as they made final preparations. If the spirit gets into your mind, if it manages to turn you against me or vice versa, we could end up destroying each other. Then we don't let that happen, Rain said simply. We trust each other completely, and we remember that whatever the spirit shows us, whatever it makes us feel, our love is real. Kaylee's nodded, though Rain could see the fear in his eyes. If something goes wrong, if I lose control. You won't, Rain interrupted, because I'll be there to anchor you. And if I lose myself, you'll bring me back. That's what partners do. The night of the new moon, they put their plan into action. They met in the guild's central courtyard, the same place where they had first shared their tentative courtship. The air was thick with magical energy, and Rain could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching from the shadows. It's here, Kaylee's whispered, his hand finding Rain's in the darkness. I can feel it. Rain squeezed his fingers, drawing strength from the contact. Then let's give it what it wants. They began the ritual, opening their hearts and minds to each other completely. The emotional connection between them blazed like a beacon in the magical darkness, impossible to ignore or resist. Rain felt Kaylee's love washing over him in waves, mixed with fear and determination and fierce protectiveness. Then the spirit struck. It came not as a physical presence, but as a whisper of doubt in Rain's mind. Images flashed through his consciousness, Kaylee's using his gifts for dark purposes. The demon's promises revealed as lies, the certainty that he was being manipulated and used just like before. He's using you, the spirit whispered with his own voice. Can't you see? He's no different from the others. He'll take what he wants and leave you broken. Rain felt his faith waver, the images so vivid and convincing that they seemed like recovered memories. But then he felt Kaylee's hand tighten around his, and the physical connection anchored him to reality. It's not real, he said aloud, as much for himself as for Kaylee's. Whatever you're showing me, it's not real. The spirit's laughter echoed through his mind. Isn't it? Look at him, little Omega. Look at the monster you've chosen to love. Rain opened his eyes to see Kaylee's standing before him, but the demon was transformed. His features were twisted with malevolent hunger, his eyes glowing with hellfire. Claws extended from his fingers, and his mouth was filled with razor-sharp teeth. "This is what he really is," the spirit continued. "This is what you've been kissing, what you've been sharing your bed with. A creature of shadow and blood who sees you as nothing more than prey." For a moment, Rain's resolve wavered. The image was so convincing, so terrifying, that every instinct screamed at him to run. But then he remembered Kaylee's gentle touch, the way the demon had looked at him with such tender reverence, the vulnerability in his voice when he spoke of love. "You're wrong," Rain said firmly. "He's not a monster. He's the man I choose to love." The spirit shrieked with rage as Rain stepped forward, reaching out to touch the twisted visage before him. The moment his fingers made contact, the illusion shattered like glass, revealing Kaylee's true form underneath. The demon's eyes were filled with tears of relief and gratitude. "Now," Kaylee said, his voice rough with emotion. Together, they spoke the binding incantation, their voices weaving together in perfect harmony. The spirit's screams of fury echoed through the courtyard as magical chains of light wrapped around its invisible form. It thrashed and fought, but the bonds held strong, powered by the unshakable connection between Rain and Kaylee's. "It's working," Rain gasped, pouring more energy into the spell. "It's trapped." Kaylee's raised his hands, dark energy gathering around his fingers. 50 years, he said, his voice filled with grim satisfaction. 50 years of hunting, of loss, of empty vengeance. It ends now. The destruction of the void spirit was anticlimactic in its swiftness. One moment it was there, a presence of malevolent hunger straining against their bonds. The next, it was simply gone, dissolved into nothingness by the force of Kaylee's magic. In the sudden silence that followed, Rain and Kaylee stood together in the courtyard, holding each other as they processed what they had accomplished. The long hunt was over, the threat neutralized, the communities that had been in danger now safe. "Is it really finished?" Rain asked softly. "It's finished," Kaylee's confirmed. "The spirit is destroyed, its corruption cleansed from the world. It can never hurt anyone again." Rain felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. "What happens now?" "Now," Kaylee said, his arms tightening around Rain's waist. "We live. We build the life we talked about, the one where we choose each other every day. No more hunting, no more divine missions, no more anything except us," Kaylee said firmly. "Unless you want there to be." Rain smiled, feeling truly free for the first time in years. "I want there to be us," he said. "Just us, and whatever we decide to build together." The kiss that followed was different from all the others they had shared. It was a promise, a commitment, a declaration of intent. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless with possibility. "I love you," Rain whispered against Kaylee's lips. "I love you too," Kaylee's replied. "Always." The aftermath of their victory was complex and challenging. The guild, unaware of the supernatural threat they had just been saved from, continued to debate the appropriateness of Rain's relationship with Kaylee's. Some members remained supportive, others continued to express concern, and a few even called for disciplinary action. It was Master Thorn who finally put an end to the controversy. "Rain Aldrich," he announced at the next guild meeting, "has proven himself to be one of our most valuable members. His judgment in professional matters has been consistently sound, and his personal relationships are his own business. Anyone who wishes to challenge that is welcome to take their concerns to the regional council." The threat was effective. The regional council was notorious for its impatience with petty squabbles, and few guild members were willing to risk their careers over gossip. The criticism didn't disappear entirely, but it became more subdued, more easily ignored. Rain found himself with a new kind of freedom. He could walk through the guild with Kaylee's at his side without feeling the weight of constant judgment. He could focus on his work, on his relationship, on building the life he wanted without constantly looking over his shoulder. "You seem different," San observed one afternoon as they worked together in the herbalist wing. Happier. I am happier, Rain replied, not looking up from the potion he was brewing. I'm finally living my own life instead of the one everyone else thinks I should have. And Kaylee's? Is he treating you well? Rain smiled, thinking of the demon who had brought him flowers that morning, who had spent an hour listening to Rain read from his poetry journal, who had fallen asleep holding Rain's hand the night before. He's treating me like I'm precious, he said softly, like I'm something worth cherishing. Sen nodded, his expression thoughtful. I owe you an apology, he said finally. I was so focused on protecting you from potential harm that I forgot to consider what might make you happy. You were looking out for me, Rain said. I can't fault you for that. But I was wrong about him, Sen continued. I've been watching him these past weeks, and I can see how much he cares for you. He looks at you like you're the center of his world. Rain felt warmth spread through his chest. He is the center of mine. Then I'm happy for you, Sun said sincerely. Both of you. The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the workshop door. Rain looked up to see a young guild member standing in the doorway, his expression nervous. Mr. Aldrich, the boy said. Master Thorn requests your presence in his office. He says it's regarding a special assignment. Rain exchanged a glance with San, then wiped his hands on his apron. I'll be right there. He found Master Thorn waiting in his office, along with several other senior guild members. Their expressions were serious, and Rain felt a familiar flutter of anxiety in his stomach. Rain, Master Thorn said, gesturing to a chair. Please sit. We have a proposition for you. Rain settled himself, trying to read the mood in the room. What kind of proposition? The kind that could change your life, said Master Alara, the guild's senior researcher. We've been discussing your work, your skills, your unique perspective on magical healing. We believe you're ready for advancement. Advancement? Rain's heart began to race. What kind of advancement? Master rank, Master Thorn said simply. Full recognition as a master herbalist and healer, with all the privileges and responsibilities that entails. Rain stared at him in shock. Master rank was the highest achievement possible within the guild, reserved for those who had made significant contributions to the field of magical healing. It was something Rain had dreamed of but never thought he could achieve, especially after the scandal with Lord Blackwood. I don't understand, he said finally. Why now? Because you've proven yourself, Master Alara explained. Your work with magical poisoning cases has been exceptional. Your research into herbal adaptation has opened new avenues of study. And your recent collaboration with Master Kaylee's on artifact safety has yielded remarkable results. Rain felt his cheeks burn at the mention of Kaylee's. Their collaboration had been their research into the Void Spirit, though the guild leadership clearly didn't know the full scope of what they had accomplished. There is one condition, Master Thorn said carefully. Master rank requires a formal mentor relationship with a junior member. We'd like you to consider taking on an apprentice. An apprentice? Rain's mind raced. The idea of passing on his knowledge to someone else was both terrifying and exhilarating. Do you have someone in mind? Actually, we do. Master Thorn smiled. There's a young man who's been asking specifically to work with you. He's shown exceptional promise in both herbalism and healing, and he's expressed admiration for your unconventional approach to magical practice. Rain felt curiosity surge through him. What's his name? Finn Morrison, Master Alara said. He's been studying at the Northern Academy, but he's requested a transfer to work with you specifically. Apparently, he's read all your published papers and considers you a personal inspiration. The idea of someone considering him an inspiration was overwhelming. Rain had spent so many years feeling like an outsider, like someone who didn't quite fit into the guild's traditional structure. To learn that his work had inspired someone else to pursue the same path was deeply moving. I'd be honored to meet him, Rain said. Excellent, Master Thorn said. He'll be arriving next week. But Rain, I need to be clear about something. Taking on an apprentice, accepting master rank. These are significant responsibilities. You'll be expected to uphold the guild standards in all aspects of your life. Rain understood the implicit warning. His relationship with Kaylee's would be scrutinized even more closely once he achieved master rank. Any hint of impropriety or scandal could reflect poorly on the guild and potentially cost him his new position. I understand, he said. I won't let you down. I know you won't, Master Thorn replied. Congratulations, Master Aldrich. You've earned this. As Rain left the office, his mind was spinning with the implications of what had just happened. Master rank meant security, respect, the ability to shape the guild's future direction. It also meant increased pressure and responsibility. He needed to talk to Kaylee's, to share the news and discuss what it might mean for their relationship. He found the demon in the guild's library, surrounded by ancient texts and scrolls. Kaylee's looked up as Rain approached, his expression brightening with the smile that never failed to make Rain's heart flutter. You look like you have news, Kaylee said, setting aside his book. I do. Rain settled into the chair beside him, taking Kaylee's hand. I've been promoted to master rank. Kaylee's eyes widened with delight. Rain, that's wonderful. You deserve this recognition. Do I? Rain asked, his voice uncertain. I can't help but feel like I'm being rewarded for playing it safe, for conforming to what they expect from me. You're being rewarded for excellence, Kaylee's corrected firmly. Your work speaks for itself, Rain. This promotion is long overdue. Rain felt some of his anxiety ease at Kaylee's confidence. There's more. I'm being assigned an apprentice, a young man named Finn Morrison who apparently admires my work. That's even better, Kaylee said. You'll be an excellent mentor. I hope so. Rain squeezed Kaylee's hand. But I'm nervous about the increased scrutiny. Master Thorn made it clear that my behavior will be held to a higher standard. Are you worried about us? Kaylee's asked gently. I'm worried about what this means for us, Rain admitted. I'm worried that I'll have to choose between my career and my happiness. Kaylee's was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of Rain's hand. What if I told you that you might not have to choose? What do you mean? I mean, Kaylee said carefully, that there might be a way to make our relationship more officially acceptable. Rain's heart skipped a beat. What kind of way? Marriage, Kaylee said simply. A formal bonding ceremony that would make our relationship legally recognized. Once we're married, the guild would have no grounds for objecting to our partnership. The word marriage hung between them like a promise. Rain stared at Kaylee's, trying to process what he was suggesting. You want to marry me? I want to spend my life with you, Kaylee said. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep in your arms every night. I want to face whatever challenges come our way together, as partners in every sense of the word. Rain felt tears prick at his eyes. Kaylee's. I know it's soon, Kaylee said quickly. I know we've only been together for a few months. But Rain, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, and I want to make that love official. I love you too, Rain whispered. But marriage, that's a big step. It is, Kaylee's agreed. But it's also the right step. For us, for our future, for the life we want to build together. Rain looked into those ash-gray eyes, seeing sincerity and hope and infinite love. He thought about the journey they had taken together, from that first charged encounter to the moment they had stood together against the void spirit. Through all of it, Kaylee's had been his anchor, his partner, his choice. Ask me properly, Rain said softly. Kaylee's smile was radiant as he slipped from his chair to kneel beside Rain. Rain Aldrich, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Will you marry me? Will you be my partner, my husband, my heart for as long as we both shall live? Yes, Rain said, the word barely above a whisper. Yes, I'll marry you. Kaylee surged up to capture Rain's lips in a kiss that was sweet and desperate and full of promise. When they broke apart, both were crying and laughing at the same time. I don't have a ring, Kaylee said, his voice rough with emotion. I don't need a ring, Rain replied. I just need you. They held each other in the quiet library, surrounded by books and bathed in the soft light of magical lanterns. It was perfect in its simplicity, this moment of commitment and choice and infinite possibility. When? Rain asked finally. Whenever you want, Kaylee said. Tomorrow, next week, next month. I'm ready whenever you are. Rain thought about his new position, about the apprentice who would be arriving soon, about all the changes that were coming to his life. After I get settled in my new role, he said. After I meet Finn and make sure he's comfortable here, I want to start our marriage with a clear head and no distractions. That sounds perfect, Kaylee said. We'll have time to plan something special. I don't need special, Rain said. I just need us. The next week brought Finn Morrison, and Rain found himself charmed by the young man's enthusiasm and dedication. Finn was everything Rain had hoped for in an apprentice eager to learn, respectful of tradition but open to new ideas, and possessed of a natural talent for healing that reminded Rain of his own early days at the guild. I can't believe I'm actually here, Finn said on his first day, his eyes bright with excitement. I've been studying your work for years, Master Aldrich. Your paper on magical poison neutralization changed my entire approach to herbalism. Rain felt a warmth spread through his chest at the young man's words. I'm glad it was helpful, but please call me Rain. We're going to be working closely together, and I prefer a more informal approach. Rain, Finn repeated, testing the name. I like that. It feels more collaborative. That's the idea, Rain said, leading him through the herbalist wing. I believe in learning through partnership rather than hierarchy. You'll be my apprentice, but you'll also be my colleague and, I hope, my friend. Over the following weeks, Rain threw himself into his new role with enthusiasm. He discovered that he loved teaching, loved seeing the spark of understanding in Finn's eyes when a concept clicked into place. The young man was a quick learner and an eager student, and their working relationship quickly developed into genuine friendship. You're a natural teacher, Kaylee's observed one evening as they walked through the guild's gardens. Finn adores you. He's a remarkable student, Rain replied. Bright, dedicated, and refreshingly open-minded. I think he's going to do great things. I'm sure he will, with you as his mentor. Kaylee squeezed Rain's hand. How is he adjusting to guild life? Very well, considering. Rain smiled. He's made friends with some of the other young members, and he seems comfortable with the routine. The only thing he seems nervous about is meeting you. Me? Kaylee's raised an eyebrow. Why would he be nervous about meeting me? Because you're the famous blood mage who won the heart of his beloved mentor, Rain said teasingly. He's probably worried about making a good impression. Well, then I'll have to make sure he knows he has nothing to worry about, Kaylee said. Perhaps we could invite him to dinner? A casual meal where we can all get to know each other better. Rain's smile widened. I think that's a wonderful idea. The dinner was a success, with Finn quickly warming to Kaylee's gentle humor and obvious devotion to Rain. The young man asked thoughtful questions about demon magic and listened with rapt attention to Kaylee's stories about his travels through different realms. By the end of the evening, all three men were laughing and talking like old friends. I like him, Kaylee said later as they prepared for bed. He's intelligent, respectful, and he clearly loves you. He reminds me of myself at that age, Rain said, eager to prove himself, desperate to belong somewhere. I want to give him the guidance I wish I had received. You're going to be an excellent mentor, Kaylee sighed.